Yo, officer, yo, you wildin', yo. You wildin', officer, you wildin', yo. You on some real disrespectful shit, B. You mad
He's crazy. You're from 2X Precinct? He's a dick sucker. Dick sucker nigga. You feel better? Crazy. There's kids out here and all that.
It's gonna light it 10 minutes later.
There's kids out here and everything, boss.
You feel better?
That's crazy, boss. There's kids out here, boss.
Crazy, yo. Like, for real.
Look, it's kids out here. Kids out here, boss.
Like, it's kids out here. How you
Kids out here, boss.
Show me the video. I'd like to see
Nah,
It's
it's
kids.
nothing, man. Watch out,
It's
man.
kids out here. Look, it's little
Like,
kids.
be high right now, man.
Little kids.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So I know all of these recent protests and rallies have made a lot of people aware of how bad racism really is in this country. You even have white people on TV calling out open white supremacy. And it damn sure better start waking up black people if the last at least 350 years haven't done so already. And now we've reached another boiling point in America. And now you have all of these racist people who are tired of having to be silent about their racism. They want to just put it out for display for everybody to see. And if you think there aren't any police officers who was probably at this neo-Nazi rally or at the very least share the same ideology as these people, you are sadly mistaken. And while we sit here begging and asking and pleading for them to stop doing injustice to us as a form of our protection, we use protests as a form of defense. These neo-Nazi members and KKK members, they're going out and joining the police force. They are going out and running for office to be in control of the local policies, and they are winning. You even have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, telling the police officers, when you're dealing with these thugs, please don't be too nice. Please don't be too nice when you're dealing with these thugs. If you bang against the car, oh well. Now let's see which violent thugs and violent criminals Donald Trump is talking about.
Walking down the street. This is what he do. An old man they put on the car.
A chorus of confused voices, puzzled by what they're witnessing in their South Memphis neighborhood. 91-year-old Otha Thurmond led to a waiting police car in handcuffs after police say he waved a stick at them and tried to intervene in a separate assault investigation.
And they asked him, what is he doing with a stick? He said, I'm old, I need this stick. He showed it to them. They grabbed him. They slammed him on the car. Put his arm all the way up here to the back of his back.
There's no cell phone footage that shows any of that, and police say they won't be able to release body camera video until after they complete their investigation. But 3 witnesses confirmed these accounts.
He never raised his stick up in a threatening manner. He roughed him up and threw him on the car as if he was some young thug.
They had the old man like this, up against the car, right over here.
None of this appears in the misdemeanor citation Thurmond was handed for disorderly conduct. That officers ordered him to sign shortly after we arrived.
I've never been in jail in my life. In jail. I never paid a traffic ticket in my life.
We checked, and Thurmond has no criminal record in Shelby County, making his arrest and his alleged treatment all the harder for his neighbors to wrap their heads around.
I'm just enraged. I'm enraged.
So here you have this 91-year-old man being harassed and assaulted by the police. And they felt threatened because this 91-year-old man had a stick in his hand. And it wasn't even a stick, it was a damn cane. This man had never been in trouble before, never as much as a traffic ticket. And then they give him the citation for getting assaulted by the police, I guess. Because notice, they didn't give him anything for something he did before the police started harassing him. All this came because they were harassing him. But the reason why they feel justified in assaulting an elder in our community, or feel comfortable enough to come into a group of black people and pour water on their grill, is because they know they can do it. And right now we living in a time where we can't afford to be divided, because they are amping it up. They are getting more confident. They are getting more bold. And they know that they can walk into a crowd of black people and shoot one and walk out without a scratch. They do all this stuff on purpose, like, I wish a nigga would do something to me. But if they were to walk into a crowd of armed people, they be thinking twice about whether they should follow the law or not. That's a whole different ballgame. But when groups like the Black Panther Party, when they try to inform you about your right to bear arms, they're put on the level of the KKK. But if it's one thing we need to incorporate from these people, or incorporate from the American experience, just like all of those statues of the people that they worship so much, they said, give me liberty or give me death. They would rather be dead than oppressed. You see, these people are in a position of power, but if they even think that it could come close to ending, they form militia and have armed citizens out in the streets. But yet, when the police beat up an old man or shoots a kid, we too busy being divided over ideologies. Even as black people in America, we still suffer from tribalism. We have a hard time putting our beliefs to the side to form our own militia together, to police the police and to police ourselves. But if we're not going to form a militia, the least we can do is have people joining the police that can go into our communities and actually protect us. We need to be running for offices in your local areas, like district representative or mayor or whatever. The people who are in charge of the direct policies in your communities. Or you can hire your own police chief that can decide whether to carry out a policy or not. By teaching our children to become judges and lawyers and come into the defense of the judges and lawyers that we have today. Like Judge Olu Stevens and Aramis Ayala. We need to be having their backs. We need to be focusing on our economies. And we don't even have to stop being consumers. Just give your money to other black people. Buy from other black people. Keep the money in the community as long as we have to. We can't say we don't have the money. We just have to focus it in the right directions. I mean, right now, we can elect a board of successful businessmen and make this committee strictly for funding and growing black businesses. And we can all just contribute to it. Now, make sure they're transparent in everything that they're doing. Make sure they keep their word, and whatever they say they're going to do, they're going to do. And if any of that changes, stop sending your money right away. Our ancestors left us the blueprint of how to create successful economies. They left us the blueprints of how to create healthy black families. What we have to do is learn how to protect those things. Whatever we have to learn how to protect it. And if we don't, they will continue to come and destroy whatever we build. So I want to hear what you got to say.
For Complex News, I'm Hanuman Welch. In the late hours of Friday night, Trump took the latest step in the full-throated executive branch endorsement of white supremacy by pardoning the monstrous former sheriff of Maricopa County, Arizona, Joe Arpaio. The former sheriff was convicted of misdemeanor contempt of court back in July of 2017 for routinely violating the rights of Latinos and racially profiling people as illegal immigrants. And in a surprise to no one, he has been a Trump supporter from day one, going as far back as jumping on the Obama birther wagon in the mid-aughts. For more than 20 years, Arpaio ruled as a tin pot fascist in Arizona and brutally oppressed communities of color, but even that description barely covers how truly evil this man was. As the news was breaking late Friday night, the Phoenix New-Times, who have been covering Arpaio for more than 2 decades, took to Twitter to revisit some of the former sheriff's greatest hits. Under him, the Maricopa Sheriff's Office failed to investigate hundreds of sex abuse cases, many of which involved children. He fed inmates meals that cost as little as 15 cents each, and was proud of the fact that the food was rotten and contaminated. Arpaio tortured inmates who were on psychotropic medication by locking them in unbearably hot solitary confinement cells, and those with physical vulnerabilities were mistreated too. A paraplegic had his neck broken by guards, and a pregnant woman lost her baby after officers left her in her cell instead of taking her to the hospital. And again, those incidents barely scratched the surface of how evil Arpaio's reign was for the 2 decades he ran Maricopa County like the racist, fascist police state that it was. And Trump pardoned him. Some have argued that the pardon of Arpaio, a sheriff convicted of intentionally disobeying the orders of a federal judge by continuing to operate unlawful patrols that targeted people of color as potential illegal immigrants, is an attack on the federal judiciary, and therefore an impeachable offense. And don't let anyone tell you this man was controversial or polarizing. He was a truly monstrous white supremacist, and Trump pardoned him the way that all presidential pardons go down, late on a Friday night, just as a Category 4 hurricane was about to make landfall, and the president was on his way to Camp David for another weekend vacation. Oh, did the president have anything to say to the people of Texas before Harvey plowed into the state?
Well, there are questions tonight surrounding the background of a newly appointed Texoma police chief after we found his name linked to websites that sell media and memorabilia aimed at skinheads and white nationalists.
News 12's Rachel Knapp looked into it and brings us this investigative report.
Last week, the Southern Poverty Law Center released a hate map following the events in Charlottesville, Virginia. That map identified only one group operating in Texoma, ISD Records, a website that sells racist media and memorabilia aimed at skinheads and white nationalists, with the website featuring a banner that reads, "The Voice of Blood and Honor," an international coalition of racist skinhead gangs, and artists like the Klansmen, and album titles including Hitler Was Right. We tracked down the certificate of ownership of ISD Records filed at the Grayson County Courthouse in 2004. With the signature of a Bart Alsbrook with a Denison address. Colbert Reserve Police Officer Bart Alsbrook was named interim chief this week. We called Alsbrook about that application last week. He denied he was the Bart Alsbrook behind ISDrecords.com. We searched for another Bart Alsbrook and couldn't find another person with that name in the United States. When we called him back to ask him about it, Alsbrook claimed a group of skinheads stole his wallet and began using his name after a fight at a heavy metal concert in the 1990s. Court records show Alsbrook was charged with attempted murder back in the 90s. He says the victim misidentified him, and the charge was eventually dropped. And in 2005, the SPLC identified Alsbrook as Blood and Honor USA's Texas coordinator, and the man behind NS88 Videos, a website similar to ISD Records. County records also list Alsbrook's name and Denison address as that site's owner. He also denied he was the person behind that site. NS88.com was also taken down shortly after we asked Alsbrook about it. Colbert city officials declined to speak to us both about Alsbrook's hiring and the story. Alsbrook says he is the interim chief until the city can hire a new full-time chief. Reporting in Colbert, Rachel Knapp, News 12.
Documents obtained by News Channel 3 revealed threatening posts on social media directed at Judge Carlos Moore. Police say it's possible the posts stem from Moore's decision to remove the controversial Mississippi state flag from his courtroom in July. One post stated, "You're not untouchable. You can't hide behind the court system or closed doors. If I were you, I would start checking my surroundings." Another person replied, "You're a piece of expletive. I guess you need a bullet in the head." That was followed by this post, "Terminate him." Warrants have been issued for Paul Millwood and Jeff Porch for cyber-stalking, email threats, and harassment.
We're working with the social media site to try to determine where their location may be.
Right now, there doesn't appear to be anything linking the men to a hate group.
And we take any threat against any of our sitting judges, whether if they're in our jurisdiction, whether they're a county judge, a city judge, a circuit judge. We take those very serious, and we're going to do everything that we can to prosecute anyone that makes any physical threats against those individuals.
Additional officers have been assigned to the municipal court building where Judge Moore sits. He was not in his chambers Thursday. Police will also be checking to see if Millwood or Porch knew Moore or ever appeared before him in court. Meanwhile, some residents in Coahoma County believe no one should be threatened over whether the state flag flies or not.
We all got to learn to live in the world and get along with one another, no matter what symbol there is on the flag or what symbol people have on their car and whatnot. So, I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Overcoming cancer while I sat in law school. I was 24 hours from death, and at that point, when the Lord spared my life, I knew that I had purpose and I was committed to that purpose. I moved on, and when I ran for state attorney, I did not run on my desire not to seek death penalty. I'd been a prosecutor, I'd been a public defender, a professor of law at FAMU's law school. I had seen a lot, and that wasn't what I stood on. What I stood on was data. What I stood on was research. What I stood on was evidence-based policies upon which we can win reform. When it comes to criminal justice reform, the truth is the only thing that matters. We're inundated with people feeling that they're afraid of it, feeling that this isn't the way to go, feeling that I feel this way, this is how it's always been. But the truth is, it's not working. More people die in prison before they're executed, and we have funded them living in prison until the day that they die. More people are killed, and we're not reducing it. The states that have death penalty actually have higher homicide rates than those that don't. So when I made the decision, I violated no laws. Let that not be mistaken. I understood the statute, I moved forward, and I used my prosecutorial discretion to say that I would not proceed with death penalty. And despite the attempted humiliation from the governor of my state, I feel no shame. I don't regret what I did. I stand because I believe in what I did. I believe that it is legal. I believe that it is proper, and I believe that the NAACP is the organization who knew it from the very beginning. I will not compromise what I believe is right according to the law. This is not a personal opinion. If you look at the data, if you look at the statistics, if you look at the truth of death penalty, it is not working, and I will not stand behind it. I will follow the law. And if the Supreme Court makes a ruling that is contrary, I will live with that. But I did not violate any laws on the front end. They're going to have to fix the law if they want me to go backwards. So I just want to say to the NAACP, I do want to thank you for the honor. I thank you for the work that this organization does and has always done long before I was even born. I want to thank my husband, who has been the rock while I continue to do this, my family support, and baby, you just stand up for a second. This is and in closing, the one thing that I want to say is that I didn't come out here alone. I met Marilyn a while back, and we've been able to forge a very tight relationship, and it's those type of relationships and these type of organizations that will be the heart of change of this country. Thank you for the honor.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So down in Missouri, a man named Marcellus Williams was set to be executed even though DNA evidence clears his name. So even though the governor did step in the very last hour possible, just think about how many innocent men that were put to death that didn't get that fateful phone call in the last hour.
A Missouri inmate was granted a stay of execution hours before he was set to be put to death. 48-year-old Marcellus Williams was convicted of the 1998 murder of Felicia Gale. Court documents show DNA evidence from the murder weapon wasn't available for his 2001 trial. But analysis of the knife used to stab the woman to death reportedly found DNA from another man. Prosecutors argued other evidence still proves Williams' guilt, but his lawyer and the Innocence Project say they are relieved by the governor's decision to stay the execution. Governor Eric Greitens said in order to carry out the death penalty, there must be confidence in guilt. He appointed a board of inquiry in the case, which will issue a report about whether Williams should be executed or have his sentence commuted.
But in this case, you have a white woman dead and a black man the suspect. So, of course, he has to pay. It doesn't matter what DNA says. And they say they have evidence, but the only thing they have tying him to this murder is an ex-girlfriend who was on drugs and a prison mate, neither of which was there when the crimes was being committed. But of course, somebody has to pay for the death of this white woman. Now, we have known that the criminal justice system hasn't been fair for a very, very long time. It hasn't been equal for black people since about 1640. Yet, time and time again, we are surprised when we don't get justice. In fact, I'm surprised when we do get justice. That is the surprise. And we all know about the school-to-prison pipeline. They turn children into criminals so that they can make money off of slavery. Because if you read the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, it says, except if duly convicted of a crime. But then again, the 7th or the 8th Amendment don't apply to us because we don't get judged by a jury of our peers. And the punishment we get are excessive. And with the privatized prisons, they're making money hand over fist. And by the way, if we want to protest something, we should start looking into these companies that have anything to do with these privatized prisons and boycott them if we want to boycott anything. But, they'll justify all of it by saying, well, if you look at the data, blacks are more violent. Black people are the thieves. Black people are this. Black people are that. We are the criminals. When, you don't want to check who has the criminal history, but black people are the criminals. But when you ask for the source for this information, they have a hard time bringing it out. But even if they did bring out any sources, the question is, what was the methodology that they used to get these statistics? Does it go by convictions? Does it go by charge? Does it go by suspected? Does it go by arrested? Because if it goes by convicted of crimes, black men do more time for marijuana convictions than they do for rape convictions. A white man can be convicted of molesting a baby and putting it online and won't do 1 day in jail.
It's a very strange case and very unusual circumstances.
Wapello County Attorney Gary Oldenburger says not every case is black and white. Craig and Groom's case is one of those. It started as a federal child pornography case.
These guys would troll through those websites where children and teenagers frequent and chat, and they would chat with them online.
He says 2 men pretended to be a teenage girl to Grooms and asked him to perform sex acts.
If they could convince someone to do some kind of sexual activity, they would record that.
Oldenburger says Grooms did not know he was being recorded when he touched the 1-year-old girl in these apartments. Still, some Ottumwa residents told me that's not right.
He should have known right from wrong, but he still did it, and it's still wrong.
One of the most significant factors in Groom's sentencing was the victim's family's wishes.
They were concerned that he'd be on the sex offender registry and that he'd go to treatment, but they really didn't want him to be in jail or to be in prison.
He says Grooms was evaluated by a psychologist and not deemed a risk.
I don't believe that he has a particular interest in repeating this kind of behavior.
Still, the talk of this small town is his lenient sentence.
He harmed an infant, and he needs to suffer those consequences that he did.
Meantime, in my state, if I get caught with an ounce of marijuana, I'm now a felon. But, even though history and statistics are not on their side, they still expect us just to take their word for it. And here you have this black woman, overly qualified, is now catching all kinds of backlash because she wants to do away with the death penalty. Now, even though she has facts and statistics on her side, they still decide to take all of her cases away from her, to basically take her power away. And guess what? They can do that. Or a black man who says, I will not let a black defendant have an all-white jury. His job is taken away from him, suspended without pay, and he is the racist judge. Not the judges who is okay with having all-white juries for black defendants. But when have you ever seen a white defendant have an all-black jury? Name one case where that has happened. Or any jury has been all-black. And I understand that white people are the majority in America, but most of these cases happen in places where black people are majority of the city and definitely do not make up 0% of the population. If the jury is supposed to make up a reflection of who lives in that district. But until we create our own system, our own infrastructure, it'll be the same results. I mean, OJ did 9 years for stealing his own football cards. A black man, Ramad Chapman, was found innocent and was still sent to jail. Just because the judge felt like, or the jury got it wrong and I think he's guilty. So he took it into his own hands. But I didn't see him suspended. I didn't see his cases taken away from him. No, we try to start a petition and get him disbarred. Like they care what we say on a petition. None of that matters until you have a nation backing you up. Until you have an army backing up the words you say. And if we can accomplish the short-term goals like building the economy and rebuilding our families, then we can start being in control of our local areas. Regaining control over our kids' education. Controlling our own narrative. Then we can start reaching out to people in Haiti and helping them and let them help us. And reaching out to our people in Africa and helping them and let them help us. But until we are in control of our own lands, our own government, our own armies, make our own decisions, we won't be protected globally. Because this happens all over the world. That doesn't mean you have to live in Africa, but if you want to live in West Virginia or Idaho somewhere, or Chicago or California or Virginia, you have to have a nation backing you up and an army backing you up. If you're waiting on America to change its ways, you're going to be waiting for a long time. America was built on racism. Racism is the foundation of America. You take that away, then you cripple America. And I don't care how good you think they are, that is not what they want. We all we got. And if we don't do nothing about it, then nothing will get done.
We have some breaking news. The clock running out for Missouri death row inmate, and we have learned now that the governor of Missouri has issued a stay in the execution of Marcellus Williams' execution. That execution was set to happen tonight at 7 p.m. in Missouri. The governor has issued a stay because his attorneys have come out and said there is new DNA evidence that shows that he did not commit this murder and that the 48-year-old is innocent. I want to go to our reporter Scott McLean, who is in Missouri, with more on this breaking news. Scott?
Hey, Pamela, there's a lot to unpack here, but the bottom line is that Marcellus Williams has been handed a lifeline by the Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, at least for now. Greitens, in a press release, announced that he would create a board of inquiry to look into whether Williams actually committed the murder that he's accused of back in 1998. So, for now, the execution will not go ahead as planned. It was scheduled for just about 4 hours from now, 6 o'clock local time, 7 o'clock Eastern. That board of inquiry will be made up of retired judges. It will have full subpoena power to ultimately get to the bottom of this. Now, keep in mind, this issue was at the Supreme Court in Washington. We were still waiting to hear from justices as to whether or not they would issue a stay of Williams' execution. We hadn't heard yet, but obviously the governor has power regardless of what the court decides to spare a man's life, and in this case, that's exactly what he's done.
Right, that request went to Justice Neil Gorsuch. Just to give us some background on this case, what are his lawyers relying on to stay the execution in terms of the DNA that has been uncovered?
Yeah, so there was never any physical evidence linking Marcellus Williams to the actual crime scene in this 1998 murder of a local newspaper reporter who was stabbed more than 40 times in her house. In 2015, a judge allowed new DNA testing to be done on the murder weapon, which was a kitchen knife, Pamela, and that DNA testing came back. It showed some mixed results, but 3 out of 4 of the analysts who looked at it said that it should rule out Marcellus Williams as maybe not a suspect, but as someone who had that knife in their hand. Now, the state argues, look, he may have been wearing a glove, and there's plenty of non-DNA evidence to uphold this conviction.
Major breaking news tonight. President Trump has in fact pardoned former Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Remember, he was convicted last month of only criminal contempt. Now, we're going to keep showing Steve Harrigan, who's on the ground in Texas tonight, Corpus Christi, in just a second. But this was moments ago, the video you'll be seeing. But on the phone joining us, I believe his first interview, former Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio. First of all, Sheriff, I'm very relieved for you. You're 85 years old. You have dedicated your entire life to public service. You came under fire for obeying what are the laws of the land. I applaud the president for what he did tonight. It was the right thing to do, and he telegraphed he was going to do it the other night. But hearing it tonight, how did it feel?
Well, it's great. I love that president. He supports law enforcement, and I'm very humble. If you recall, 2 years ago, I supported him, and I said publicly recently, pardon or no pardon, I will be with him to the end. And I'm going to have a news conference early next week and get to the bottom of this and show the abuse of the judicial system in politics. I'm not going down without trying to defend myself to all those people that don't like what I've done.
Yeah, Sheriff, it's got to be daunting after all those years of public service that here you are, you know, facing a potential year in jail. And, you know, I've known you for many, many years, sir. And I remember when you stood up and you said, wait a minute, these are the laws of the land. I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm sworn to uphold the laws of the land. Others that were also have sworn to uphold the laws of the land are not doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Isn't that really the root of the troubles for you?
Yeah, after all these years, 55 years in law enforcement around the world, and here I am on the defense table because they wanted to do everything to get rid of me, certain people, and I'll discuss that more next week. It's my wife's birthday. I just left the spaghetti and meatballs for you. So 60 years marriage and now birthday, and here, this is a good present for her, too, believe me.
I believe it. Well, listen, that's certainly better than what you could have been facing. If you ended up in one of your own jails, you'd have pink underwear and a bologna sandwich that cost 50 cents. And,
well, it's federal. Sean, it's federal. I could play
be club fed?
Yeah, 3 meals a day. So it would have been all right.
three in a cot, right? All right, on a serious note, give us a headline of the abuse of the judiciary before we get back to Steve Harrigan on the ground in Corpus Christi tonight.
Well, first of all, you're a great journalist who kind of broke this story. He's a lawyer, too. But I'm going to discuss all that with my lawyer. I think people will be shocked. They probably won't believe it, certain news media. They're trying to destroy me all these years. But we'll see. We'll try to get the message out Monday or Tuesday.
All right, Sheriff, our best to you and your wife. Thank you for all the years of service. I'm relieved for you, for your wife, for your family, and I'm glad that the president, he did the right thing. There's no question about it, and I'm sure he'll take heat, but he's a man of conviction, as we've all learned, and he is not going to be compliant to what people want him to be. And I think that's why people admire him so much. Sheriff, all my prayers, all the best, sir, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Now an ex-Madison County Sheriff's deputy set to plead guilty to child pornography charges. Bruce Harvey facing charges including the production of child pornography. He's also accused of taking minors across state lines with the intent of having sex. Harvey had been assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. He was arrested back in May. An indictment against him alleges Harvey had contact with 2 girls while working as a karate instructor. This happened between 1998 and 2007.
Protests and counter-protests today in the streets of Boston. You can see crowds starting to gather around the Boston Commons right there. The demonstration was being billed as a peaceful rally for free speech. But after violence erupted 1 week ago in Charlottesville, the city is now on high alert. Local authorities are concerned that extremists like neo-Nazis and the KKK may try to attend. In response, as many as 30,000 counter-protests are expected to show up. Those protesters are also in that area. You can see that wide area stretching all the way down for blocks.
I'm not going to waste my time worrying about these Confederate statues. That's wasted energy. What we as black people need to do, we need to worry about getting our education. We need to stop killing each other. We need to try to find a way to have more economic opportunity and things like that. Don't waste. Those things are important and significant.
All right, listen, Charles Barkley, I'm sure, will be pilloried and vilified for preaching common sense, but I think he's dead right. I think that when I look at Kevin Durant and LeBron James using their platforms to attack the presidency, and President Trump, who, you know, I think we're all in agreement he's a reality TV star that's in over his head as the president. I think we all agree with that. But I don't need tall basketball players being the front men for criticism of the president. There's no other race that elects tall athletic people to be their spokesman on social issues. And again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because Charles Barkley is a tall athletic person, but mostly he talks common sense, and he's not trying to be the front man for a movement or electing himself as some sort of spokesman. Every other ethnic group, particularly among their wealthy, and these athletes are wealthy, they use their resources to financially support smart people to represent them, or people that are specialized in politics to represent them. We are electing our tallest and most athletic people to represent us, and we look foolish doing it.
Well, I never want to stop freedom of speech, but I do think that they should be careful, because I think a lot of times the people who are talking tend to think one way, and the people who think the other way don't speak out as much. And I think that's why a lot of us were surprised that Donald Trump was elected in the first place. Mm-hmm. So you have to take into consideration that not everyone thinks like you. And when we're criticizing the president, like, listen, he is the president. That's just a fact. So I would rather go in the direction of trying to unite than continuously attack. And I think if we can come at it at a place of more of love and understanding than attacking, it will probably be heard better from everyone. But I also don't want to knock a player for using his platform to speak out about something he feels passionately about. Just be careful and thoughtful in doing it.
All right, and we back on the forecast. Now, 300 or 400 some years of what we've been through should be enough for us to start standing up for ourselves and start protecting ourselves. Our ancestors gave us the blueprints. All we have to do is follow them. There's short-term goals where we get ourselves together here first, and there's long-term goals where we get us as a nation globally together. But instead, we are still stuck in a tribalism mindset, while these people can come together under the banner of white and be able to rough up one of your elders, an older person, an old man in your community. They can walk into a group of people and shoot one and nothing will happen to them. Or better yet, they can walk into a group of people and take one away under arrest and put him on death penalty. It don't matter if he committed the crime. Now, this is nothing new, and it will continue to happen until we learn how to protect ourselves. And until that happens, we will continue to have the same experience over and over and over. At some point, enough has got to be enough. But, you know, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.